1 second. Okay.
Hi, we see you sitting there.
No, hi, CCBC people, welcome.
Say something.
They might be on mute.
Oh, they're muted. That was a good point anyway, even though you're on mute.
Thank you for coming.
Let's go.
You want to start, Peter?
Well, you're going to create a context? I think we should start, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I am Carey McDougall, the Director of Academic Affairs at Penn State Beaver. I'm so glad that each and every one of us is here today. It's an honor to see our community come together like this to kick off our common read, which is Community, the Structure of Belonging, written by our keynote speaker today, Peter Black. On behalf of PA Cyber and Bridges and Pathways, Bridges and Pathways is the higher ed consortium that includes Penn State Beaver, Robert Morris University, Geneva College, and the Community College of Beaver County. On behalf of both PA Cyber and the consortium, I want to give a deep thank you to PA Cyber's Chief Executive Officer, Brian Hayden, and their Senior Technology Director, Dean Phillips, who both spearheaded this event and brought it to fruition, both fiscally and technology-wise. And of course, I'd like to thank Maggie Rogers, Nicole Farles, and Scott Rutledge for making this partnership seamless. Can everyone hear me okay? Are we okay so far? Recently, I was in a discussion with Peter where Peter described a good math teacher as someone who teaches us to fall in love with each other while in the presence of learning math. So I just want to repeat that. He described a good math teacher as someone who teaches us to fall in love with each other while in the presence of learning math. I believe that Peter, as a teacher of building community, will inspire us to do exactly that today, to learn to embrace each other, to find and support connection to each other, so that we may collectively raise ourselves to live even more meaningful lives than we already are. Peter's book, Community, gives us a very clear framework to have the hard discussions, to explore the elephant in the room as a way to deepen our understanding of each other and find connection, i.e. to make community. So it's my hope for us today that hearing from and working with Peter over the next hour will encourage you to, one, read Community or finish it if you haven't already, and two, to create that next challenging stitch in a weave of care and love for each other that we have avoided, but are definitely poised to make happen. This video conference event, I think, will be abundant with grace by the very nature of us all being able to connect in this way, but even more importantly, by the commitment that we are all bringing to engaging with Peter's ideas. On a technical note, we have you all muted, but if you do unmute yourself, if you can remute yourself until you would like to speak, I'll be using the chat room. Please pull up your chat room. You just go down to the bottom of the screen and click on chat. And I'll be using the chat room to ask you to ask a question by video. So if you post a question there, I'll say, okay, Diane, can you ask that question on video right now? Especially after the group sessions that we'll be breaking into. So it's now with gratitude that I turn the virtual mic over to the Dean of the University Library at Robert Morris University, Dr. Tim Schlak, to introduce Peter.
Wow, thank you, Carey. It's such a pleasure to get to introduce Peter Black. Peter's an author and citizen of Cincinnati, Ohio. He's also the author of 9 books, including Community, the Structure of Belonging, The Abundant Community, with John McKnight, and co-author of An Other Kingdom. He's part of the Economics of Compassion Initiative and a member of his local neighborhood council. Peter also serves on the board of Elements, an urban arts center, and Live Person, a provider of online engagement solutions. His work is in the restoration of the common good and creating a world that reclaims our humanity from the onslaught of modernism. And as I wrap up this introduction, allow me to observe that Peter, like the best teachers, is a master at using universal dichotomies that would otherwise oversimplify reality in lesser hands, but that he uses to great effect to connect with his audience in order to transcend the divisions that too often divide us from one another. He sees us stuck as humans, stuck in our futile meaning-making systems, and he names the dilemma we find ourselves in and he rejects the postmodernist shrug and courageously insists that there's a there, and that there's a what to society's numbing question, so what? It's such a pleasure to introduce you, Peter, and we look forward to learning alongside you today. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Carey. That was very touching what you said. And so there's a reason for us being together, which is the same reason I wrote the book, that there's a lot of chatter, there's a lot of noise. You know, if you listen to the public conversations, it breeds a sense of isolation and helplessness. And I don't believe that our lives are reflected by the public conversations, because it is very polarizing. I know you're having locally a public conversation about a new industry coming. And on one hand, it's always the promise of jobs that brings things to town. On the other hand, there's people concerned about losing a way of life and a connection, intimacy to each other. The basic premise of this time together in the book is to make a connection between the narrative we live into, the storyline we live into, and the day-to-day problems we face. And the purpose of the community, the belonging, is to overcome our isolation. If we don't overcome our isolation, then the problems we face will be left to technical solutions. And so every community worries about safety. It worries about raising a child. It worries about livelihood. It worries about their health. And in this consumer culture, we've decided we can purchase all those things. We live in the illusion that the medical profession can keep me healthy. And the fact is, about 15% of my health I can explain or take to the doctor. I live with the illusion that I can purchase safety, when the reality is that eyes on the street and my connectedness to my neighbor is what makes me safe. And livelihood, if we are connected to each other, there's a lot of research that says I'm going to make more money too. And so all the things we care about have to do with our connectedness, our sense of it. And the world now keeps us apart. Technology keeps us apart. I spend my life looking down. I don't make eye contact anymore. And so the dominant narrative is one of contention. It's one of distance. It's one of trying to be right. It's one of control and consistency and predictability. And it doesn't pay attention to what Carey said. This teacher said, I'm a math teacher, and I want to get people connected to each other in the presence of a math teacher. And so it calls for a different kind of leadership. It also shows that my connection to my classmates is what helps me learn. And most higher education, with you all as an exception, is designed for great teaching, not designed for great learning. Same with high schools. And so this is the shift we're trying to initiate, is to say that our connection with each other is decisive in producing the world that I want to inhabit. More technical skill, more professional help, more police, more teachers, more certified teachers, higher training of teachers, more STEM agenda, more common curriculum at colleges across the country does not produce learning. What it produces is more sponsorship. It produces more funding. Because in many ways, our schools are kind of a public investment in training for the private sector. And the purpose of this time, the purpose of the book was to try to say, look, we live in a narrative of deficiencies. We live in a city where if I turn on the evening news every night, all I hear is what happened bad during the day. If it bleeds, it leads. If I listened to the news, I would think my city was a nightmare. Who died? Who burned? Who was robbed? Where did it go wrong? If I think of my country, I would think my country is in some small way represented by what I watch on CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. Journalism tells the story of crisis, tells the story that we have a problem, that we're deficient. And so the alternate narrative is to say that I am here to find out what my gifts are. A friend of mine, Frances Strickland, said her goal, and her husband was governor, is to have every 18-year-old in the state of Ohio know what they're good at. If I met with you now and was in the room with you, and I wish I was, and asked you what you're good at, you would look at me like, what are you talking about? And in my life, I know that I'll only find out what I'm good at a eulogy, okay, and I'm going to be gone. I'm going to have to wait until I die to be forgiven. And there's a lot to forgive. It's going to be a very long eulogy. And so we're trying to shift that consciousness and say, why don't we come together and use this classroom, use this staff meeting, use this community meeting to have a conversation about what are our gifts, what's working here, what are we good at? Because as soon as you get into first grade, I'm put into competition with my peers. The normal curve, all right, is laid upon my head like a Napoleonic hat. And I'm decided to compete. And I was a B student. A's would still make me nervous, okay? And, but for me to get a B, somebody else had to get a D or an F. And so I was put in competition with my peers. That's not good for learning. It's good for teaching. It's good for social control. I had the liability of having the last name ending with a B. So I always sat in the front of the room in those days. And that's how I learned to make eye contact. And I learned how to smile. And I figured that was good, at least one grade point, all right? And so this is what we're trying to shift. And there's certain conversations that take us in the direction of a communal experience. Even when we're divided about what's good for my community, even though I'm divided about what's good for my school or my building or my room, I need to be connected with the people that may see the world different than me. And right now we're organized around fear. We're terrified of the other. We're terrified of the stranger. Nationally, that's a conversation that has been in this country since the early 1800s, is why are we letting these people in? You know, it's not current, it's not today, it's in our character to be afraid of the stranger. In the early mid-1800s, it was people from Southern Europe. You know, this country was begun by Nordics, Northerners, Northern Europe. Oh my God, you're going to let Italians into this country? You're going to let Irish into this country? You out of your mind? And so there is something in our DNA. And so the idea of community, the deeper purpose of education is to help people get close to and discover they can be connected to the other, the stranger. Hospitality is the welcoming of strangers. And the classroom and the academic buildings are perfect containers for discovering the stranger and discovering what we have in common with each other. I don't care about how you see the world. A lot of times, a friend of mine says, look, if you're going to disagree with me, I'm warning you right now, I'm going to take your side. That's the threat that I am. All right. And the other notion is for every great idea, yours, the opposite idea is also true. So as Tim said, what does that mean, that both sides can be true? All it means is that we see the world differently, but it has nothing to do with my capacity to learn or connect from you and from each other. And Stanford University says all learning is social, which means that what people really learn from is each other. And when you go to a conference, how was the conference? They say, oh, the lunch was great. And I met some wonderful people. They weren't the speakers, but they were one. And so the idea of a community is to say peer relationships are much more critical than leader-follower relationships. If you care about learning, and I'll get specific in a minute, possibly, the students' relationship with each other is more critical to their learning than anything you say as a teacher. Now, you need to know what you're saying as a teacher. That math teacher who wants the kids to fall in love with each other needs to know math. But people will not learn math until they feel they're safe with the people around them. And so it leads you to create space where people are in circles. It leads you to get rid of tables, all right, which are designed for listening and passivity. Like one group I can see, CCBC, you're in a nice U-shaped table, and you sit that, or you sit in a classroom in rows, and the message the room says is, keep your mouth shut. If you sit in a classroom with just chairs and circles, the message is, if you came here to be passive, you're going to be in trouble now. I'm so conditioned to be passive that I like sitting in the back. People go to church. I go to church to find God, but I'm going to sit in the back in case I want to leave early. And so the back of the church always fills up first. So this is what we're trying to create as an alternative. And it comes out of a different narrative. And narrative is produced by questions. The questions I ask you communicate to you what world I want to create. If you go into a neighborhood and ask people, is this safe here? What you're declaring with that question is you're a dangerous person. If I ask you, how many years of schooling have you had? I'm declaring by that question, you're stupid, because nobody had enough schooling. And so we're trying to find questions that in the asking produce the kind of hospitality, welcome, neighborliness that's conducive to learning, it's conducive to performing. It's good for the neighborhood, it's good for the community. So one of these questions is possibility. What did you come here to create? One of the questions I'm going to ask you in a few minutes is, what's the crossroads you're at this stage of your life? Another set of questions is, what doubts and concerns do you have? People don't ask this in the classroom. That after 10 minutes or 20 minutes of a session, you should be asking students, would you break into small groups and talk to each other? What doubts and reservations do you have about what's being presented today? Because unless I state my doubts, they own me. They control me. And so doubts, dissent, big conversation. There's big conversations of commitment. What's the promise you're willing to make? In some ways, in a system of education, which is a very difficult system because it's so siloed. Every profession, most people in professions in higher education care more about the people outside of the system than they do about the system. You ask a professor, do you want to run something? They say, leave me alone. I got my classroom. I got my classroom to keep me warm. And so you say, what's the promise you're willing to make? And then you ask people, what gifts do you have? What are you good at? And that's a big question. And so these conversations, in the asking, you don't care what the answer is. If people say this is baloney, I didn't come here for that, I'm always breaking people into small groups. And half the keynotes I used to give have a bunch of middle-aged white men sitting like this. And by their body position, they said, I didn't come here for any of this small group crap. And it doesn't matter whether they came for it or not. I just say, I know you didn't come for that. And I know I'm a great disappointment. I got it. Okay. Now, would you break into small groups with 3 other people that you don't know? And so you, by your questions, by the way you structure how we enter a room, you declare in the question and the structure the kind of world that you came to produce together. And you don't worry about the answers if people are out of it, if they don't like it, if they resent it. I send emails. I've had people call me on the phone, talk about my books in a less than positive way. And you say, all right. So now I know why I wrote the book, was to irritate that human being. And so that's the idea, is what are the questions? We'll have you do that in a minute. And then you have peers talk to each other about it. Q&A is a patriarchal form of discovery. Okay, it pretends that the person asking the question doesn't know, and the person answering the question does, and that's just silly. Because everybody has an expertise about their own being, their own future. Everybody, and part of what you're doing, and I recognize some people here who buy this, but part of what you're doing is confronting people with their freedom. This is the task of leadership. Whether you're a head of academic affairs, you're confronting faculty with their freedom. They didn't come for their freedom. They came to be left alone. Carey, why do you hold so many meetings? What's the matter with you? Can't you go back to art and sculpture, for God's sake? And so I don't care what you came for. If you say, well, I'm here to meet people's expectations. Well, I'm not here to meet expectations because they're too low. I'm saying, why don't we together worship a larger God? In the community you're around, and you have this energy employment, I forget what you call it, coming to town. What a great chance for us to get together, not to say yes or no, but to say, how are we going to sustain the life we want no matter what happens to us? You can't control what happens to you. Businesses come, businesses go. Leaders come, leaders go. Presidents come, presidents go. That has nothing to do with the life you and I can create together. And the classroom in higher ed is a container to discover that. And that's kind of that's the first half of the book. The second half of the book is about questions. Questions bring us together. Answers drive us apart. And that's where the journalism is changing. There's things called now solutions journalism, relational journalism. And so the storytellers have a huge impact on what I think the world is like. And to me, higher education has the purpose of confronting people with their agency, with their freedom. And you do this with questions by asking people, okay, what's the crossroads you're at this stage of the game? And in answering the question, I become an agent. If I ask you, what's the promise you want to make? I don't care what the promise is. But I know if you answer the question, you're in trouble, because now you've shown up. You've become accountable. You're not there as a passive participant. And the ultimate passive participant is called a consumer. It's called a customer. It's called a client. It's called a patient. And this is the renaming that's going on. It's really an effort towards the common good in the higher education, whether it's community or Penn State or whatever it is. Doesn't matter. Its purpose is to be a voice for the common good. That's what that risk is, that the private sector, for all its beauty and wealth and genius, takes from us the notion that we're in this together. And that's why that normal curve in the first grade was so painful to me, because I said, oh, I'm going to have to compete. And it's gotten worse. I got grandchildren. I mean, they got several helicopters watching them. You know, it's not just a helicopter mom. There's a whole team of helicopters watching them. And so they're both true. Of course you need a grade. Of course you need standards. Of course you need a curriculum. Of course you need a teacher that knows the business. And of course you need connection, undesired, unwanted, uncalled for, among peers, whether they're faculty or students. And that's kind of what I want to give a taste for in the small groups. And you say, what's this got to do with anything? Well, this is how accountability is created. You cannot hold somebody accountable. That's a silly idea. Sooner or later, I'm going to take my hand off your arm. And then what are you going to do? Sooner or later, I'm going to stop watching. And so all the attraction we have to the teacher, to the boss, to the leader, to the president, it's overdone. And you say, well, to be accountable, I have to choose to be accountable. I decide every day when I walk in a room whether I'm going to learn anything or not. And if I decide I don't want to learn anything, I'm just punching a ticket. Well, as a leader, as a professor, as a faculty member, I don't want to collude with that passivity. And so I'm not here to meet people's expectations because they're too low. The technology, the social media pulls us apart. And what you're doing is a chance to bring us together. And you know, that's my opening presentation. It lasted 24 minutes, but that's as short as I get. So what I'd like to do is have, what we're going to do is break you into groups of 3 and 4. If you're in the room together, like I see 4 of you in the room together, okay? CCBC. There may be others I can't see. I want you to sit with each other in a circle and answer the question I'm going to give you. So if you're in a room, if you're in an auditorium, stand up and turn around. I've done this in churches. Churches scare the heck out of me because I've been asked to give a talk. And they're all lined up and the chairs are nailed down. I thought, how am I going to break them into small groups? And then I think, well, I trust in God. And I say, stand up and break it. So if you're in an auditorium, whatever room you're in with other people, form a circle of 3s. 3 is great because it's unstable. If you form just twosomes, you may get somebody that really doesn't want to be here, and then you're out of luck. You over there at CCBC, I give you permission to form a group of 4, okay? But you have to get away from the table, get in a circle, and I'm watching. And we're going to find out who you are, okay? I know you didn't come for this, but neither did I. So get in a circle and answer the following. When you get, I don't know if you're in small groups yet, but if you are electronically, answer the question, what's the crossroads I'm at this stage of the game? And you can pick what game you want to talk about, teaching, faculty, student. Now here's a rule that will be enforced through the magic. Do not be helpful to each other. There's nothing more demeaning than trying to help another human being with advice. All right, do not give advice. When people say something to you, just say to them, tell me more. Curiosity is the connecting communal way to engage with other people. Why does that matter to you is the most powerful question in the universe. So somebody say, here's the crossroads I'm at, and then someone else say, why does it matter to you? And don't be helpful. Even if people ask for advice, when people ask me for advice, I say, I'll give you advice if you promise to follow it. And then they never take me up on that, wisely so. So are we in the small groups?
Peter, I'm going to open them up right now.
Thank you. What's the crossroads you're at this stage of your life? And why does it matter to you? Ask each other that question. You've got 12 minutes, so that's a lifetime. Thank you. So breakout room 1 must be us.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
So your name is?
Brian Brannigan.
Brian Brannigan. Okay, Brian. My name's Dean Phillips. I'm going to put you into one of our breakout rooms.
Yeah, I think I was in one of the CBC ones, CBCC, I don't know.
Okay.
I had to unmute myself and I accidentally threw myself out of the room. So.
Oh,
Anyway.
so, okay. I'm going to move you into another breakout room. 1 second.
Sure.
Where are we at?
Hello?
So can you join that waiting room?
I didn't see an invitation to join.
Okay.
So I'm on a mobile Zoom app. Is it a different button? I mean, I know that I saw a little dialog box come up at first. So
okay. Did you get the invite now?
I haven't, I'm not seeing it show up on my, oh, there it is. There's a little,
Okay.
I'll make sure.
All right, so who else goes in this breakout one? CCBC?
No, I think that's good.
Oh, marketing.
There's 3 people. Yeah, there's nobody in that. That's good. And then 5 has 3. So 6, I would just move.
Hello?
I would move Tim to somebody. Tim. Robert Morris.
Or maybe people joining us? I don't know. Or are they inviting us to join them? I don't know. Yeah, what does it say there? The host is inviting you to join breakout room, breakout 3. Do we join it? Okay.
Welcome back, everybody. It seems that people were engaged in conversation. I can see Penn State Beaver. I can see you in small circles. That's wonderful. So now what I'd like to do is, if you can, if somebody in your group can enter into the chat session, and we can post questions for Peter. And then I can either ask them or I can call on you to ask them through video if you're not.
Yeah. If people, anybody wants to make a statement, it's not just questions.
Yeah.
Make a statement, just unmute and make your statement. And you'll be in a line, or it'll be chaotic, and we can handle either one.
Peter, I'm wondering if you can talk about, you stated that accountability is actually created through making relationships, not through power, not through hierarchy, not through rules. Can you talk maybe about some of the common, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say like common faults that people slip into when they're trying to build relationships, say in your community, where they slip back into power or rules when they just need to be building those relationships?
Well, you don't have to choose, all right? We need structure. I need order. I just don't need it to be the only point. And so our hour together is very structured, you know, and so I want that structure. But usually I revert to when I get nervous, when I get uneasy. And so I think the more control I have, the more less anxious I'll become. And I'll give you some tips. No matter how controlling and structured the world you're in at the moment, if whatever reason you're together, if you just ask everybody, are you getting what you came for? And that's not a complicated sentence. Are you getting what you came for? And in that question, I'm building connectedness in the room. I don't have to come in the room for the purpose of building relatedness. I don't care what the purpose is. The purpose could be to design an engineering blueprint. But if the fact that I'm in a room with 3 other people, or 4 other people, as CCBC is, okay, I need to connect with these people regardless of how much structure we came to create. If we come to build a building, I want the architects and the owners and the people who occupy the building to know who each other is. And so the idea is to put within the control and structure and order world, within the defined curriculum by state legislatures, all right, which of course know everything about education, but they decided here's the curriculum, here's how we're going to run our schools. We always have an opportunity to not talk about relationships, but to connect through questions like, are you getting what you came for? Every meeting you have, you can say, could we just go around quickly and find out what the hell you're doing here? Now, the nicer question is, why was it important for you to be here today? I love that question. And I don't care if we're here, like I said, to create order, structure, and we're a disciplinary committee for unruly faculty, okay? And give ourselves an acronym and meet every 3 weeks to get rid of these unruly. I don't care what you're there for. Okay, what the purpose is. I still want to know, why was it important for you to be here? What did you come here? Because in that question, you're demanding people become co-participants in creating the future. If education isn't for that, then I don't know what it is, because everything you're learning is going to be obsolete in an hour and a half. Now, you need the framework. Picasso, before he became Picasso, was a student in Madrid, and he drew graphic examples of sculptures that were perfect. He copied exactly what he saw. And then he graduated. So you need the foundational learning. I need to know math. But I don't want to miss the opportunity to learn more about how to use that math and how to be with other people in the use of math. And then Picasso went to Paris and became Picasso. And I don't know what the hell he was doing other than he became Picasso. Somebody asked his mother, wouldn't you rather him have been a general in the army of Spain? And she said, no, then he wouldn't have been Picasso. And And so that's the idea, is not to talk about relationships. I don't want to go to a group where the purpose is relationship. Okay, leave me alone. All right, I'm an introvert, misplaced. But I want in every group I'm in for people to say, "Are you getting what you came for? What is it you want from each other?" You want to ask a question that blows the world apart. In a faculty, in a room, in a community. I'm on a neighborhood council. And so I'm Mr. Community Facilitator. Well, good luck, Peter. The neighbors line up in rows. And I've 4 years in the making, I still have to bootleg questions because everybody wants the city council to sit in front of the room. And I have a microphone and they don't. And once in a while I just lose it. And I stand up, I say, would you all break into small groups and talk about whether you really care about a plastic or wooden bench in front of a bus stop? This is the monumental stuff that neighbors deal with. But in talking about the bus stop and the bench, I'm connected to people that I never would have known. Mm-hmm. And going to your classroom, Wes's school district, and whatever you're doing, I came to be with the stranger. That's the relationship that matters the most. People love like-mindedness. And like-mindedness works in a consumer world, because every time I buy something, I go somewhere to Powell's and buy a book, and they say, here's what other people like you have bought. I say, damn, I'll buy it. And so like-mindedness is great for sales. It's great for consumption. It's horrible for accountability, for agency, for healing a wounded world. It's horrible for whatever I'm studying to bring it into the world. And so every room you go in, you say, who do I know the least and how do I? And as a leader, you can do that and get away with it. And if anybody would like to say something and unmute yourself, if you're in that kind of a moment.
Peter, DRK has a good question to ask you. DRK,
really?
Do you want to ask that question?
Sure. This is Daniel Rossi Keene, by the way.
Oh, Daniel.
Hey, Carey. How you doing?
Good.
Hi, Peter. I feel like you started gesturing toward my question in your last couple comments, but I was curious if you could tease out relevant differences between ideas like community, solidarity, agreement, and what I'm really getting at is the relationship between community and consensus, or community and agreement.
Community, to me, is an expression of our capacity to produce together a future we want to live with. Agreement is overrated. A lot of times in meetings, there's a lot of tension. And my question has always been, I got your differences. Is there anything you've heard that you can agree with? And it becomes like a seed. Agreement is different. So community to me is building trust in the agreement to make the place better together. And that's sometimes called social capital. And it's our capacity. So if I'm in a neighborhood council meeting, some people want the market and some people don't want a market. And so the question is, what is it we can connect with? And mostly I want to structure it so people are really listening to the other side. I don't care whether you agree or not, it's overrated. And most of people's stories, they made up anyhow. My favorite quote is that in Russia, even the past is unpredictable. And if that's true, then it's true about my story too. Peter, the wandering Jew, father died, you're too young. Well, those things did happen to me. But my way of speaking about them, I constructed. And you get same kids, same family, you listen to them talk about their parents, you wouldn't even recognize it the same. It doesn't matter. So agreement's overrated. I want to leave with something we can agree on. But I think in solidarity, I like the word because it has an intensity to it. It means I'm going to stand by your side no matter what. And unless it's an act of violence, no matter what you do. I was telling Carey, I'm in this neighborhood council, we argue over things. And then somebody I just argued with, who irritates the heck out of me, and speaks down to me, and I could give you a whole story I made up about this person, is in the produce department, what the hell am I going to do? Skip lettuce? And so I think that's what solidarity is, means that we're going to be together in creating a better world, a better neighborhood, a better place. And with this big employer coming to town, it's a great opportunity to say, let's get together, let's listen to each other and decide how we're going to live together in the face of no matter what happens. And those, a lot of places, the employer left town. It left it wounded. And some cities went to the state. And the federal government said, what are you going to do? How are you going to save me? We just lost 400 jobs. That they never prospered. The other communities said, well, here's what the world has happened to me. Now, what are we going to do to live together and sustain a culture, raise our children, give support? Those cities prospered economically, despite the fact that they didn't get, the 400 jobs back. Brian says, so many beautifully useful ideas. I'm looking at you, Brian. I can't keep up with my notes, so this is being recorded. But Brian, let me give you a tip, okay? Everything that matters to you, you'll remember. I take notes all the time, and I realize everything that matters to me. Kathy and I like Springsteen concerts. Well, I didn't have to write down how you get tickets for a Springsteen concert. You can't get them anymore, but when you could, I know at 20 to 10, tickets go on sale at 10. You call 3 other venues that you don't want to go to, and you get in line and you talk to them. And it gets to be 8 minutes to 10. You go down to one other venue. Could you look for this? And then at 4 minutes to 10, you log in, and at 10 o'clock, you're in the front of the line. And we had 4 people doing it on 3 different computers. I didn't have to write that down. Anyway, this is being recorded. Yeah. And if you can stand to listen to it again, God bless you.
Peter,
yeah.
Penn State Beaver has a question. They have a big group in their auditorium. What role do you see technology and social media having in supporting and developing community?
Well, the beauty of technology is it's convenient. I can be with you today. It's convenient. We could be with each other. Social media, unfortunately, has you're asking a great question. So I think for logistics, for staying in touch, after we've come to know each other, the social media is awesome. And it's just so convenient. But I think it's such a mixed bag. But my goal, because I have a design learning, it's a training company for 40 years, is to say, how do we humanize a digital world is how I would frame the question. Now, breaking into small groups with people is one way to do that. If you got 5 people, all the questions I ask you, what's the crossroads you're at, why was it, I can ask those questions like digitally. I just don't want to buy and overpromise. Learning on the go becomes a product placement. I just want to use the technology. And it's not an argument about technology. When I grew up, I had to wind up a box to make a phone call. All right? And if it was 3 rings, it wasn't for me. Well, now I make calls I don't even mean with this phone. And so I love the technology. I love this. I love, the fact we can see each other, at least one of my senses. I just don't want to romanticize it. At some point, I've got to be in the room with you. Or maybe it's for an hour or a day or a weekend. And the social media, it's just too complicated. I think it's a great way to gain knowledge. It's awesome. And I thank God I didn't have stock in Encyclopedia Britannica, because Wikipedia would have put me out of business. But I think asking that question is its answer. How do we participate in a digital world in a way that maximizes our capacity to connect with each other? Just ask that question. And I love that question. And small groups, breaking up, getting voices. Any other questions people have? Technology. And so thank you, Jen, for asking the question. And then I don't know if I answer the question about community solidarity agreement. I think if you have ideas that seem alike, you need to keep them separate. That part of the power in creating an alternative future is making distinctions between community and agreement, between ideas and action. The biggest challenge facing all of us is to act on what we know. I don't need to know anymore. And to Brian's question, you know, I will remember all that matters, and I need to read something 5 times. And in my life, every 5 or 7 years, I need to find a new God. I need to find somebody that's, I need to find somebody that sees the world inverted than me. And when I do, I go after them. I read everything. I try to stand next to them. I stalk them. And so the pursuit of ideas is life-giving. And that's why I love higher education. And you just have to fight the commercial pressure, the branding pressure. But God bless you that are in higher education, student, faculty, administration. You're under assault, you know, and you're expensive. I don't know where the money goes, the cost thing. And it's kind of crazy, but I shouldn't. It bothers me that only when young white people got really in debt, we call it a national problem. So there's a political dimension to that I find unsettling, let's say. But the institutions are precious, and I don't care what they're going through. And that you have to guard to support the liberal arts, which is code for relationship. It's code for a culture. It's code for an aesthetic version of life. That's what's disappearing. And I was talking to Carey, you know, all imagination, all peace, all healing comes from some form of the arts. And where else do you find them organized these days except in higher education? And it comes in the form of vocational education. You know, I actually learned how to make a tree house when I was in grade school. And so I'm happy to be with you today, really.
Peter, Brian, Tim Schlak has a really good question. Tim, do you want to ask it?
Sure, I think I'm unmuted. I'd really love to know, Peter, who's inverting your world right now? Who's that person or that group of people thinking to really make you want to sort of invert your own way of looking at the world and finding a new God, as you say? I love that.
I know. You know, I'm mesmerized by people writing about the common good, the Schumacher Center. And I'm reading Jonathan Rowe and Peter Barnes and other people. And I've been so immersed in the private version of myself, in the individualistic version of myself, that it's just blowing my mind. I can only read so much because it's so disturbing to me. Naomi Klein wrote a book about this disaster capitalism or something like that. And when you're in the middle of something, it's hard to see it. And so my gods are helping me to see what I'm in the middle of, and I thought was true. Most of the conventional wisdom, I thought it was accurate. You know, I thought I was supposed to make a living. I was supposed to go to school, supposed to have children, supposed to have a mortgage, supposed to grow old gracefully. And Peter Kestenbaum came along, and he told me that what I thought were my personal neurosis. I read a book on psychological diseases once, and I thought, I qualify. And then Peter said that's to be lonely and confused and anxious is what it means to be a human being. That changed my life. Tim Galway came along and taught tennis, and he teaches tennis without ever giving a stroke instruction. What the hell is going on here? Tell me how to hold a racket. Tell me how to swing, how to bend my knees and keep my eye on the ball. He says, that won't help you play tennis. Here's a racket, grab it, start swinging, and tell me how far from the center of the racket did the ball hit. Just measure it, don't judge it. And so you get people like that. And now it's about the commons. It's about the common good. And it's not about the air and the water. It's about reclaiming the land into land trusts. It's about realizing a local economy is where my future resides. And, you know, Walmart's not coming to town. And actually, Walmart measures how many jobs it brings, but it never measures how many jobs it costs. And so to me, the violence we see in the culture is directly related to our willingness to say, well, there's something in the commons that we have to collect. And we have to care about poverty. We have to stop the notion that poverty is inevitable. It's not inevitable. So a lot of my work now, and thank you for asking, Tim, is how do I reconstruct the notion of poverty? There's no such thing as a poor person. Because as soon as I call you poor, I call you broken. And that kind of stuff, you know, whatever I'm interested in is upsetting me. And that's a good thing. That's what God does to you. Makes you a nervous wreck. Otherwise, it's not God.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Peter, Brian asked about what other opportunities are there to engage with your teachings or to engage in learning environments to practice these ideas.
Well, give Wes a call. And, you know, design learning is a major vehicle for that. And just look up the Schumacher Center. Read Yes Magazine. All right. It's all over the place. And the Democracy Collaborative, that's the stuff I'm into now. In terms of my book, there's all kinds of relationships. Go to your local bookstore and look on a bulletin board. You know, but my stuff, there's a website called restorecommons.com. And everything that I read or find or hear or watch and blown away by, I stick it there. So it's my favorite warehouse, restorecommons.com. Thank you, Brian. So I want to honor the time. And how has this gone, Carey?
I think it's gone really, it's just been good.
That's good. That's enough.
Yes.
I only asked that question because of my own anxiety about whether anything I do makes a difference. But I feel good about it. And thank you for staying on with me, Carey and Tim. I loved your introduction.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us and participating with us. There will be events at all the campuses around Peter's books, and the libraries across Beaver County are having events too. So do please keep your eyes and ears out, and then definitely check out the more information that is on the Bridges and Pathways website. You can just Google Bridges and Pathways Beaver County, and it will come up. And read Peter's book and tell us what you think.
You know, I would love to recycle with you at some point when this cycle's over and find out what you're creating there.
Could we do that? Will you promise that you'll do that with us?
I promise I will do that with you, because otherwise, if I want to listen to myself talk, I can go look at and find a mirror. But something's going on there. I can sense it from the energy you have and the cooperation among higher educational institutions, technically based ones, place-based ones. What's going on? I mean, that's a miracle. Of all the clients I ever worked with, the higher ed were the most difficult because they were so silent. And now you've got all these institutions saying there's something we can do together that we can't do alone. Absolutely. Absolutely. Congratulations, really.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so we will sign off to everybody. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you again at one of our events.
Take care. Happy Halloween. This may have been it.